videos, we revisited some cool British singles released during the Summer of Love. Now, it's time to take a look at some cool releases from September 1967. It's interesting to note that many of these singles from September had a rather autumnal and melancholic feel about them. So, without further ado, here are some cool British singles from September 1967.
Town clock in the market square.
September 1967 saw the release of Procol Harum's second single after the massive success of A Whiter Shade of Pale, which became one of the biggest hits of the 60s. The song is the most played record by British broadcasting of the past 70 years. The group faced a very difficult challenge. How could they follow up A Whiter Shade of Pale? The result was Homburg. The single got mixed reviews in the press, with many reviewers pointing out that the song was very reminiscent of their previous hit. Journalist Derek Johnson reviewed it for the New Musical Express.
This follow-up to Harum's #1 single could well have been titled A Paler Shade of White because it's very similar to the group's first disc. The main melody line is taken by clanking piano, with that spine-tingling organ playing a background role. And the beat, emphasized by crashing cymbals, is more pronounced than before. It's another disc that gets right into your blood, and it's obviously a smash.
The song wasn't nearly as successful as A Whiter Shade of Pale, but it was still a decent hit, reaching number 6 in the UK and number 18 in the States. Many singles released in 1967 failed to reach the charts when they were originally released but became cult favorites over the years through its appearance on several psych compilations. This is the case with this single by Sands. Mrs. Gillespie's Refrigerator was a decent pop song written by the Bee Gees. But the real highlight here was the B-side, Listen to the Sky. The song had a truly unusual structure. It starts out as an excellent psych pop song with a good upbeat melody. But suddenly, the sound of air raid sirens starts dominating the song. And a completely out-of-control fuzz guitar gives way to a doom-laden coda that seems to predate the sound of bands like Black Sabbath or King Crimson by at least 2 years. The coda was based on Mars the Bringer of War, a Gustav Holst composition. The band was discovered by Beatles manager Brian Epstein, who saw them live at the Cromwellian Club in London. Epstein was so impressed by their live show that he immediately signed him to his NEMS management company. The single was released by Reaction, a label run by Robert Stigwood, who had recently become Epstein's partner at NEMS. Unfortunately, the release of the single in early September coincided with Brian Epstein's sudden death on August 27. And nobody at NEMS or Reaction Records bothered to promote the single. As a consequence, it was barely reviewed in the press, and it earned very little radio play. The single sold very few copies, which explains its current rarity and value. Nobody at NEMS bothered to secure them live bookings, and the band eventually decided to split up due to lack of work. Several years later, Sands guitarist Rob Freeman was asked about the song. Freeman said, "It's pretty much what we used to do on stage, complete with smoke bombs, flash powder, taped sound effects, and controlled guitar and bass feedback. I don't know if it expanded anyone's psyche, but it was our mandatory anti-war statement, and it scared the girls shitless."
Summer days just after summer rain.
One band that definitely deserved more luck and success was the Zombies. In September 1967, they released the song Friends of Mine, with Beechwood Park as the B-side. The songs were recorded at Abbey Road just a few days after the Beatles finished recording Sgt. Pepper's. Both songs would eventually be included on the Odyssey and Oracle album, released 7 months later in April 1968. Both sides of the single were excellent. But the flip side, Beechwood Park, was perhaps the highlight. The single was a critical success. The New Musical Express wrote,
"This group seldom gets the success it deserves from British fans. And in an attempt to remedy that, I'm told the boys have taken 6 months off to rethink their pop approach. This could well be the break they're looking for. I hope so." The flip side is a slow number about summer days spent in Beechwood Park. It's very sad and makes a nice contrast to the top side.
Despite the positive reviews, the single failed to chart.
Cigarettes burning faster and faster. Everyone talking about the ever after.
Not to be confused with the American band of the same name, Kaleidoscope were formed in London and were active between 1967 and 1970. This single was released a couple of months before their debut album, and it was a critical success when it was originally released. Chris Welch from The Melody Maker wrote,
A new group to the recording scene. 4 young boys with some clever lyric ideas and a far-out sound that many top industry people are expecting to happen soon in a big way. This mournful, poetic sound is an interesting example of their future work, but it is early to say if they'll have a hit yet.
Record Mirror wrote,
The lyrical and whimsical talent within Kaleidoscope is a rare and beautiful thing, and to establish all that these boys want to say through their talent on one single is virtually impossible. So much so, that before this, their first release, they have already nearly finished an album of their own songs. Songs ranging from quite beautiful modern fairy tales, to most profound and awe-inspiring comments on the world we live today.
Despite the critical acclaim and a decent amount of airplay, the song failed to reach the charts. However, it was successful enough to grant them an appearance on this French television show, where you can see French singer France Gall and French actress Heidi Politoff digging the psychedelic sounds of the band.
He's King Midas with a curse. He's King Midas in reverse.
The Hollies released one of their most psychedelic and adventurous singles in September 1967. King Midas in Reverse, however, marked the beginning of the end of the Hollies' relationship with Graham Nash. Nash wanted to take the band in a new direction, but this was resisted by other members of the band, who wanted to play more accessible pop music. The single was a commercial failure by the Hollies standards, only managing to reach number 18 in the charts, and this only helped increase tensions within the band. The British press, however, was very enthusiastic about the single. Nick Jones reviewed it for the New Musical Express.
The colourful army of summoning brasses and flutes, sensibly arranged by Johnny Scott, gives the new Hollies composition the very edge, the very sunburst that's necessary to bless such an excellent and burstingly climatic song. This is fresh young Hollies to warm your heart and bless the charts.
When asked about the song, Graham Nash said, King Midas in Reverse is all about a guy who touches everything and it turns to dust. That's me. That's how I feel when I'm down.
I've seen the rain again.
Maybe Graham Nash was partially right when he said he was King Midas in Reverse. Nash contributed to the recording session for this excellent song by Marmalade, and the single failed to chart in Britain. Despite its commercial failure, Jimi Hendrix considered it one of the best cuts of the year. In an interview a few months later, Hendrix was asked to name some of his favorite albums and singles from 1967. And I See the Rain was one of them. Hendrix said, "Records are getting better and I have a feeling it's going to explode into one beautiful scene. I can't see why the Marmalade's I See the Rain missed." I See the Rain was Marmalade's debut single, and it got very positive reviews in the press. Chris Welch reviewed it for The Melody Maker.
Here is a great sound by a great group. The Marmalade have long deserved recognition. And here is the originality on record that they needed to get them away. Already successful on the club circuit, the Marmalade should now finally spread all over the country. The intro includes thunder and rain effects followed by roaring guitars and a cliff-hanging beat.
Even though it missed the charts in Britain, the single was a chart topper in the Netherlands. September 1967 also saw the release of Tomorrow's second and final single, Revolution. The band featured future Yes member Steve Howe on guitar. Twink, the drummer, joined the Pretty Things a few months later and played on their psychedelic cult classic SF Sorrow. The drummer also became a founding member of the Pink Fairies in 1969. Lead singer Keith West already got a taste of success earlier that year, when his solo single Excerpt from a Teenage Opera became a big hit all over Europe. Tomorrow were part of the same scene as bands like Pink Floyd or Soft Machine. They played regularly at the UFO Club and were an important part of the underground scene in London. Tomorrow were hailed as the next big thing by several members of the press. And they actually recorded the first ever Peel session in September 1967. Nick Jones reviewed the single for The Melody Maker.
Tomorrow have made a complex driving record full of power and feeling. And it should chase Keith's opera success up the chart and out into the sunlight for all to dig.
Despite the hype and the quality of their music, the band was not a great success in commercial terms. Revolution stalled at number 56. Another band which featured future Yes members was The Sin. In this case, the band featured Chris Squire on bass and Peter Banks on guitar. Even though it went pretty much unnoticed, both sides of this single were excellent. And both songs have appeared on several British psych compilations over the years. The top side was originally a rock opera called The Gardener and the Flower. The song was eventually scaled down and retitled Flower Man in order to fit the singles format. The flip side, 14th Hour Technicolor Dream, was about the famous happening that took place at Alexandra Palace in London a few months before, in April 1967. Record Mirror wrote,
The Sin are a promising new group on the Derham label with a new single bubbling happily, Flower Man. In fact, the song is apart from their stage act pop opera, which is a regular high spot of their presentation. And all that, despite the fact that a garden rake which was used as a prop, flew up and clobbered organist Andrew Jackman in the eye. A night under sedation and 5 stitches were his reward. But it's all okay now, and the boys are looking for further progress by their disc.
The band split up a few months later, and Squire and Banks went on to join a group called Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, which would soon change their name to Yes. Here's yet another band, which featured a member who would find bigger success a few years later. The Idol Race were led by Jeff Lynne, who would join the Move in 1970 and would eventually reach massive success with ELO. The Idol Race had plenty of admirers within the music press, and disc jockeys like John Peel or Kenny Everett were big supporters of the group and frequently played their music on their shows. However, the band never seemed to catch on with the public. Imposters of Life's magazine was one of the finest singles they released. Despite usually getting great reviews in the press, Nick Jones from the Melody Maker wasn't too thrilled about the song. Jones wrote,
There's a touch of the Move about this group, and a touch of the Stones as well. It certainly has the Pop 30 sound, but it doesn't add anything new to what so many other groups are doing. A pity, because they obviously went to a lot of trouble. One good original idea in the arrangement would have made a lot of difference.
Record Mirror gave it a more positive review.
Believing that it's dead difficult for a new group to get a first-time hit, I checked with colleagues. They agree with me that this has chances. This is Liberty's first British production. A song of great impact varying between soft and tough. You might not get the whole force at first play, so try a rerun. This is very bright, and very commercial.
Love by the Virgin Sleep was released on the 1st of September 1967. And it's one of the trippiest songs released that month. This is yet another example of a single that went nowhere when it was originally released but has become a cult favorite over the years. Not much is known about this band, but thankfully, we have this old article from Record Mirror.
The Virgin Sleep present a wide-awake version of Love on the Derham label. I found it a bit confusing at first, but it's since been explained that the title actually hides an age-old Buddhist chant discovered by group member Tony Reese. Tony wisely discarded its original title in favor of something more to the point. And along with Rick Quilty, Keith Purnell and Alan Barnes, devised the unusual structure of the song. Hailing from the South London area of Richmond, the Virgin Sleep do not wear saffron robes. And I understand that they've never been to Tibet.
It's safe to say that the original Nirvana from the UK probably didn't smell like Teen Spirit, but rather like patchouli oil. Pentecost Hotel was their second single, released a couple of months after their debut single Tiny Goddess. The song featured all the elements that defined their signature sound: exquisite melodies, tasteful instrumentation and arrangements, and a dominant melancholic feel.
And the record is sent to to the critics, the people whose opinion really matters. Chris Welch at Melody Maker, Penny Valentine at Disc.
Disc magazine journalist Penny Valentine was one of the biggest Nirvana supporters in the music press. Not surprisingly, she gave the song a rave review. Penny Valentine wrote,
"Please excuse me while I go quietly mad about this group, and this record. I loved their first, which was a beautiful piece called Tiny Goddess. This is equally lovely and in a way, unbelievably ethereal. They are certainly a group to watch for. They write their own material which is far ahead than most. It's a sound wild and unearthly. What I specially love is the way they make things sound grand and disturbing. Please go out and buy this, and listen and love."
The single only managed to reach number 56 in the British charts. However, it was a decent hit in Germany.
People hanging round you like mist on a morning lake.
And last but not least, the Fairy Tale. The Fairy Tale were formed in Lancashire in early 1967, and released a couple of singles for Decca Records before splitting up in early 1968. The band's music leaned towards the softer and gentler side of psychedelia. Lovely People reflected the hippie utopia and optimism of '67. It was a sort of British answer to the music and ideals coming out of San Francisco. The song is as 1967 as it gets, and it perfectly reflects the mood of that era. Turn that down. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to September 1967. See you next time.